Have you ever wondered if time can be counted where there is no death? What if you were told that in heaven, time not only exists, but has already been altered? This is a common question, and perhaps that's why it's gnawing at your mind right now. From a young age, we've been taught that heaven is eternal, timeless, a place where time simply doesn't matter. But what if that's only part of the truth? Or worse, what if it's a lie constructed over centuries to hide something you'd only understand now? Stay with me until the end, because what you discover may surprise you. There are mysteries of creation that defy everything ever preached from pulpits and printed in the most widely accepted pages of the Bible. There are enigmas hidden at the beginning of everything, even before let there be light. And among these enigmas, perhaps the most disturbing is this: is time a divine creation or a spiritual prison? In Genesis, we read about days being numbered from the first acts of creation. But who numbered these days? Who marked this time? Have you noticed that the concept of time appears even before the creation of the sun and the moon? How is it possible to have morning and evening without the stars that should define them? This isn't just symbolic. This is spiritual. It's cosmic, and maybe dangerous. Ancient forbidden texts, such as the Book of Enoch, describe dimensions where time bends, stretches, and even breaks. They speak of celestial calendars, eternal cycles, and spiritual clocks hidden in the heavens. But why haven't they ever told you this? Why have so many of these scriptures been banned from the versions that have come down to us? Have you ever had that feeling that the days are getting shorter, that time is speeding up? What if it's not just an impression? What if the countdown of time as we know it is coming to an end? Imagine a heaven where time pulses, not as seconds or hours, but as consciousness. A place where each instant is eternal, yet measured, and perhaps manipulated. But to understand why weather can exist in the sky, and who controls it, you need to see what has been hidden for centuries. Prepare to delve where few have dared to look, because what comes next will change the way you perceive eternity. And as we delve into these forgotten mysteries, tell me something. Have you ever felt like time behaves strangely around you? As if some hours stretched out like days, and other days disappeared in the blink of an eye? If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you most so far. Your insight can help others see what's also hidden, and it's precisely this kind of exchange that transforms this channel into a vibrant community of seekers of the invisible. By the way, if you're here, if you've made it this far in the video, it's because something inside you wants to go beyond what was taught. So leave a like. It not only shows that you're present, but it also helps the algorithm understand that this content needs to reach more people. It may seem small, but each like is like lighting a flame on this path of revelations. And if this is the kind of journey you want to continue on, subscribe to the channel now. That way, you won't miss the next episodes, where we delve deeper and deeper into the hidden enigmas of the Bible, into unspoken theologies, into the secrets of heaven that have been silenced for centuries. Your subscription here is what keeps this project alive, pulsing like eternal time itself. Now, take a deep breath, because the next revelation could turn everything upside down. Does time exist in heaven? Or are we trapped in an earthly illusion that doesn't even touch eternity? This question seems simple, but it carries an almost explosive power. Because if time as we know it is an invention or a limitation, then perhaps our entire idea of beginning, middle, and end is nothing more than a distorted reflection of spiritual reality. And that changes everything. It changes the way we look at life, death, and what exists beyond matter. For a long time, we've been told that heaven is the opposite of time, a place where everything is eternal, where nothing wears out, where clocks stop and the hands make no sense. But if we look more closely, we'll realize that even the sacred texts point to something more complex. In Revelation, for example, John describes scenes in which angels announce specific periods. 7 seals, 3.5 years, half a time. How can there be measurement if there is no time? Perhaps time isn't absent in heaven. Perhaps it just functions in a way we can't yet comprehend, like a consciousness, a vibration, or an invisible structure that organizes the movement of eternity itself. Now I want to go even deeper into the subject. Because if time can exist in heaven, then it's not just a marker of time. It's a divine instrument. And instruments, by definition, have a purpose. The question is, what would be the purpose of time in the spiritual realm? Imagine time as a kind of cosmic river, where events don't flow in a straight line, but in spirals, cycles, or even simultaneous bursts of consciousness. This would explain why so many mystical accounts speak of out-of-body experiences where everything happens at once. It's not just a metaphor. It's a real perception that time, when it transcends the body, becomes malleable. And this is precisely where the deconstruction of our earthly mindset begins. Because we've been taught to think of past, present, and future as separate drawers. But what if these divisions are simply human adaptations to survive in a world where everything ages? Perhaps the sky, this place we've been taught to imagine as static and silent, is actually a vibrant field where every decision generates an immediate impact, like waves in an endless ocean. If time is a tool, then there's someone manipulating it. Someone or something that isn't just watching the minutes pass, but orchestrating the cycles of creation with surgical precision. And it's at this point that the revelations begin to unsettle. There are little talked about passages, buried in the shadows of faith, that point to a God who acts within appointed times. In the fullness of time he sent his Son. 1,000 years are as one day. Before there was time, I am. Each of these phrases carries a hidden code, a reminder that time is not irrelevant in heaven. It is, perhaps, eternity's best-kept secret. And if you think this is disturbing enough, take a deep breath, because it doesn't stop there. In many apocryphal accounts, time appears as something that has been broken. There are stories that speak of eras shortened, of cycles interrupted, of divine plans altered by human decisions. And if this is true, then time is not just a cosmic element. It is an invisible battlefield, a space where forces fight for control of what will come and what will cease to exist. This new perspective forces us to ask questions not common in traditional theologies. Can time be forgiven? Can it be restored? Can it be rewritten? And where exactly did it begin? Because if eternity has no beginning, then the emergence of time was, in itself, a rupture. This rupture, according to some mystical interpretations, occurred not when man was created, but when something fell, a fall that was not only spiritual, but also temporal. Time was born from the abyss, and its counting still carries the echo of that moment of separation. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. I want to know who else is feeling that time was never just what we were taught. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because if we want to understand the true nature of time and its possible existence in the heavens, we need to go back to the beginning, literally. And it's impossible to talk about the beginning without mentioning Genesis. It's curious to note how, in the very first verses of the Bible, time already appears explicitly. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. This sentence is simple, but it hides layers much deeper than one might imagine. After all, how is it possible for there to be evening and morning if the sun and moon were only created on the fourth day? This contradiction, ignored for centuries, may not be an error, but rather a revelation in disguise. Because if there was a counting of days before the creation of celestial bodies that regulate our time today, then something much greater is being said here. The structure of reality, as described in Genesis, already carried a measure, a separation between light and darkness, between beginning and end. But this separation was not physical. It was spiritual. It was cosmic. The hidden truth behind this is that time, as divine consciousness, was instituted before all matter. It wasn't a consequence of creation. It was part of the original plan, as if the very act of creation required a flow, a rhythm, a beat, not because God was bound by it, but because creation needed an order, a sequence. Without time, there would be no transformation. And without transformation, there would be no history. And if there is no history, there is no redemption. This completely changes the traditional mindset. The idea of time being solely earthly, linear, and irrelevant to heavens begins to crumble when we understand that time was the first framework imposed on chaos, the first law, the first limit. It's as if God had opened a channel into eternity, so that creation could unfold in layers, in cycles, in decisions. And in this channel, time wasn't chronological, it was symbolic, it was spiritual. And perhaps that's why To this day, it continues to bend in ways our minds can't follow. Humanity's journey, then, is not only a return to the Creator, it is also a return to a state where time no longer rules, but serves, where it is redeemed, not worshipped, where it ceases to be a prison, and becomes a portal. But there's still something few realize. This evening and morning, described in Genesis, isn't just a way of counting days. It's a pattern of consciousness. First comes darkness, then comes light. First comes chaos, then comes order. Time, in this sense, doesn't just measure the duration of things. It reveals a divine process at work. Each cycle begins in darkness, goes through transformation, and only then reveals light. This is repeated in nature, in human life, and even in great spiritual turning points. Therefore, understanding time also means understanding the behind-the-scenes nature creation. It means seeing what lies behind the visible. It means accessing the source code of reality. And if all this was already in the opening lines of the world's most widely read book, why was it so little explored? The answer perhaps lies in the impact this truth would have on the system that educated us spiritually. Because accepting that time is spiritual and that it exists in heaven destabilizes an entire theological structure that depends on a static, still, frozen eternity. But what if heaven is anything but still? What if it is pure movement? If the heavenly hosts move, if angels traverse dimensions, if thrones shift, then we're not talking about immobility. We're talking about flow, about energy, about something in constant vibration. And for vibration to exist, there must be rhythm. And rhythm is time. This idea is frightening because it brings the sky closer to us. It makes us realize that perhaps what exists there isn't so distant, but rather mirrored within us, only more subtle, deeper, purer. Therefore, each word of Genesis carries more than a narrative. It carries a spiritual structure, a map of return. And if time was inserted into this map from the beginning, then it is indeed part of the eternal plan, not as a limit, but as a path. Comment here. That makes sense to me. I want to know who also felt that there's more to this story than we were told. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because if it is already clear that time is present in the first lines of Genesis, then the question that inevitably arises is, what was there before that? Before let there be light? Before the separation of day and night? Before the vibration of the word? The answer, contrary to what many imagine, is not nothing. It was not absolute emptiness. According to some of the oldest texts, hidden and forgotten by the dominant tradition, before time, there was silence, but not just any silence, a living, conscious silence that needed no movement to exist, a state of pure eternity, not the eternity we imagine as infinite time, but rather a total absence of what we call time, a place where nothing was counted, nothing measured, nothing expected. Because everything's simply era. This concept is so powerful that it can shake the very core of your spiritual perception. After all, if time only began to exist after divine decision, then the very act of saying, let there be, was the rupture of a unity. It was the initial cut that separated the eternal from the measurable. And if this happened, then we need to accept something even more profound. The heaven we know may not be the original heaven. This idea seems strange at first glance, but echoes in many forgotten writings. Books like Jubileus, Enoch, and even Gnostic fragments suggest that there was a reality prior to time and space, an untouched dimension where creation still slept. Before the beginning, this place was called by some the region of high silence, by others, the abode of the ineffable, a state where not even angels existed, because not even they had yet been dreamed of. It is from this revelation that our spiritual journey begins to change, because we understand that we are not just part of creation. We are the consequence of a rupture, and this rupture is what created time. The impact of this is enormous, because if time is a result of a divine decision, it is not eternal by nature. It has a beginning point, and perhaps an end point. This means that time can be undone, redeemed, or even transformed. It is not an eternal prison. It is a tool, a code, and like all codes, it can be interpreted, deciphered, and, for some, rewritten. This hidden truth forces us to rethink everything we know about spirituality. Heaven is not just a place of eternal rest. It is, above all, a state of consciousness. And if there is more than one kind of heaven, as ancient Hebrew and Mesopotamian traditions claim, then perhaps there are also different perceptions of time in each of these celestial layers. The original heaven, the one that existed before time, was the pure field of presence, a place where nothing began and nothing ended, where there was neither progress nor delay, only being. And the fact that this was interrupted by the creation of time suggests there was a choice, an intention, and the intention, in this case, may have been to allow the emergence of something that could only exist within change, free will. Because without time, there is no choice. And without choice, there is no love. Love requires decision. And decision requires past, present, and future. So perhaps time has been the price of freedom, the cost of conscience. This understanding can bring about a profound transformation in your spiritual mindset, because it shows that time is not the enemy. It is the setting, the stage on which our journey unfolds. But it is not the destination, nor is it eternal. Real eternity doesn't need hours. It doesn't need dates. It pulses beyond counting, beyond waiting, beyond the calendar. And everything we experience here is perhaps just a rehearsal, a preparation to return to that primordial state where silence was the very language of God. But what motivated this rupture? What was in the Creator's heart when he decided to break the silence with the Word? And who, or what, existed in this place where time had not yet been born? Comment here. That makes sense to me. I want to feel who also realize that perhaps time is not the beginning but the consequence of something much greater. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because if the silence before let there be light represented an eternity without counting, then the emergence of time marks a moment of rupture, yes, but also of revelation. And this thread, which connects the invisible to what has been revealed, remains present in texts that, for a long time, were considered too dangerous to be included in the official tradition. I'm talking about books like Enoch, Jubileus, and the enigmatic apocalypse of Abraham, writings that not only mention heaven, but attempt to describe its backstage, and in doing so, reveal something even bolder. Spiritual time not only exists, it is organized. These texts speak of cycles, of eras, of celestial calendars with frightening precision. The Book of Enoch, for example, details how the angels responsible for guarding the heavens also watch over time portals, doors that open and close according to divine seasons. Not seasons of the weather, seasons of the spirit, exact moments when decisions are made in the higher realms, as if earthly time were merely the delayed reflection of a clock that is already struck above. In Jubileus, the counting of time is sacred. Everything is measured in weeks of years, in jubilees of jubilees, as if there were a code embedded in the days themselves, a hidden pattern that spans generations. And more than that, every important event in human history, according to this book, occurs within a cycle that was already determined even before the creation of the visible world. These sacred and ignored records, when read carefully, point to a truth most prefer not to face. The sky is not a static field of eternal light. It moves, it pulses, and more than that, it has a rhythm, a secret, spiritual rhythm that determines the order of events, even here on earth. No apocalypse of Abraham. There is a vision in which he is transported to a dimension above the stars, where he sees thrones arranged in circles, beings walking in opposite directions to our time, and a voice that tells him, "This is a time of the invisible, which only the chosen can perceive." This phrase alone resonates like a call, a password, as if to say that there is an entire reality hidden behind the hands of our clock, and that it is there available for whoever has eyes to see. The impact of this on our spiritual journey is profound, because suddenly, time ceases to be a simple marker of age or waiting and begins to be understood as a map, an activation code, a living mystery that connects human decisions with cosmic consequences. And this raises another question. Who are the guardians of this sacred time? Who are the beings described in these texts who watch over portals, open cycles, and close eras? Because if time is a celestial mechanism, then there are hands moving this mechanism. And if there are hands, there is also intention. These revelations shake our mindset. because they remove us from the position of passive observers. They show that we are part of something much bigger than the calendar on our cell phones or the ticking of a clock. They show that each moment has weight, a purpose, a place in a spiritual architecture far beyond what most can imagine. And more than that, they show that there are parts of truth that have been silenced, not because they were lies, but because they were dangerous. Because by understanding how time really works, we begin to perceive patterns, cycles that repeat themselves, exact moments where portals open and events align. And, above all, we begin to understand that perhaps nothing is random, not even what we call chance. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. I want to know who else feels that there is something pulsing behind time, and that the truth has been hidden in pages that few have dared to read. Now I want to go even deeper into the subject, because after all we have uncovered so far, the cycles hidden in forgotten texts, the portals of time mentioned by Enoch, the spiritual calendars revealed in Jubilees, an inevitable question begins to emerge in the depths of consciousness. What is time? After all, not the time of physics, nor the time of clocks, but this spiritual time, which seems to be felt more than understood. What if time is more than a measure? What if it is, in fact, a living creation, an entity, a presence, a divine instrument that not only marks events but participates in them? This is not theory. It is real provocation. Because if God is eternal, and this is at the heart of all spiritual traditions, then what is he measuring? What would God tell if nothing had an end? This question alone has the power to shift our mindset, because it forces us to leave linear logic behind and enter a much more subtle realm, where time ceases to be merely an effect of creation and becomes part of the very spiritual structure of the universe, an intelligence embedded in the flow of reality, perhaps even conscious, something that pulses, that reacts, that communicates. In many esoteric traditions, there is talk of time lords, spiritual beings who not only observe the unfolding of the ages, but directly influence the rhythm at which they unfold. They are not masters of time, but rather interpreters of its music, like conductors of a cosmic orchestra, ensuring that every note, every pause, every silence is in the right place, neither too early nor too late. If this is true, then time can also be a language, and like every sacred language, it carries codes, patterns, keys that are only revealed to those who know how to listen with more than just their ears. Perhaps this is why so many people today feel that time is strange, that it's speeding up, that the days blur together, that the years pass and everything seems compressed, as if something were pressing against the flow of reality. What if it's not just a feeling? What if it's time itself reacting, adapting, adjusting to an invisible transformation that's already begun? The human journey has always been marked by moments when our perception of time shifts, not because the world changes, but because consciousness shifts. Time, in this sense, can be a reflection of our spiritual perception. It seems to flow when we are far from our purpose, and it seems to expand when we touch the eternal. And the most fascinating thing is to realize that throughout Scripture, time is used by God strategically. He changes deadlines, announces prophetic dates, ends cycles. He waits. He intervenes. Time is not a backdrop. It is an agent, a messenger carrying within itself not only duration, but destiny. When Jesus says that the time has come, he's not talking about a clock. He's talking about an alignment, a spiritual convergence where past, present, and future collapse into a single point. Time, there is not a sequence. It's a portal, an access that only opens when everything is ready, including the soul. Therefore, understanding time as a spiritual creation changes everything, because it means it is neither our enemy nor our master. It is a bridge, a space where our decisions take shape, where our story intertwines with eternity, with invisible touches of visible. The impact of this revelation is immense, because it takes time out of the realm of oppression, where everything must be done in a hurry, and places in the realm of consciousness, where time is not wasted. It offers itself. It reveals itself. And we, instead of racing against it, are called to walk with it, as one walks with an old sage who knows the end from the beginning. And perhaps this is the greatest spiritual challenge of our time, to stop fearing clock and start listening to what it wants to say. Comment here. That makes sense to me. I want to know who is feeling that time. In fact, has always been alive. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because if time could be a spiritual, living, and intelligent consciousness, then it can also contain codes. And where there are codes, there are messages. And where there are messages, there are those who need to decipher them. Perhaps this is one of the most hidden layers of creation. Time is a symbol left by God not only to be experienced, but also read. Symbols of time are everywhere, but like almost everything that carries power, they have been forgotten or reduced to empty rituals. Take, for example, the simple moon cycle, the 4 phases, the 28 days, the silent repetition that influences waters, emotions, decisions. In many ancient cultures, and even in the oldest texts of the Hebrew people, the moon was God's clock, not just to mark festivals or seasons, but to indicate the divine rhythm of invisible things. It was as if each phase revealed a part of what was happening behind the scenes of creation. And then, when you read Revelation, everything starts to fall into place. John wasn't just describing disconnected visions. He saw time in layers. A time, 2 times, and half a time. This enigmatic phrase appears more than once. And it's not just a prophetic countdown. It's a pattern, a pulse, a warning, as if time were being divided into cycles that aren't natural, but programmed. Now, think about it, a clock without hands. How often does this symbol appear in films, dreams, and mystical art? It represents something profound, the idea that there exists a time that cannot be counted, only perceived. A time that does not obey human logic, perhaps the original time, the one before creation. The same time that silently still touches all things, but can only be accessed by those who learn to see beyond what meets the eye. What if the time of prophecy, this time John saw, is not the same as calendar time? What if we are living in half an hour of silence in heaven, as he describes it, an interval, a cosmic pause between 2 revelations? What if the events accelerating here on earth are merely reflections of the end of that silence? The hidden truth is that symbols are being activated, some visible, others deeply spiritual. Numbers, repetitions, sequences. And these signs appear to those who develop the sensitivity to perceive that time sometimes speaks. It sends messages. It prepares. And, above all, it warns. Some say that certain symbols, like the broken clock or time frozen in dreams, aren't just images. They're personal prophecies. Small revelations that something is about to change, as if the heavens are preparing a new rhythm, a new cycle, and only those who understand the signs can align with it. Therefore, this journey we are taking is not just informative, it is spiritual, because it requires you to step outside of logic and into sensitivity. It requires you to not only listen, but to perceive. It requires you to understand that the codes of time are all around you, and also within you. Perhaps that's why so many mystical accounts tell of people who began dreaming of clocks melting, calendars fading, or even an eternity without measure. It's not random. It's a message. It's an invitation. The sky still speaks. But it doesn't speak like it used to. And perhaps now it's using time itself to communicate. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. I want to know who is beginning to realize that time was never just time. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because after traversing the secret cycles, the forbidden books, the spiritual codes, and the symbols that point to a dimension far beyond human time, a question arises that carries a silent, almost uncomfortable weight. What if time as we know it is dying? Not dying as an apocalyptic end or a sudden explosion in the universe's clock, but rather as a process, a subtle transition, where the structures that supported our perception of past, present, and future are beginning to crumble, not because something went wrong, but because something is returning to its rightful place. What if time is counting backwards? This idea may seem absurd at first glance, but think about it. If time was created as a consequence of a rupture, a separation between eternity and creation, then its end might represent a return, a realignment, a return to the origin that, instead of moving forward, spirals back to the point where it all began. Some say this countdown isn't made in days or hours, but in decisions, in transformations of consciousness. And this changes everything, because it suggests that time isn't a straight line. It's a field, a spiritual space that expands and contracts according to the density of human choices. And when the collective begins to awaken, to perceive, to question, time responds. It shrinks. It accelerates. It gives back. This hidden truth lies between the lines of many prophecies. Unless those days were shortened, no one would survive, said Jesus, speaking of the end times. This phrase is not metaphorical. It suggests that time itself would be altered, shortened, readjusted by something beyond human logic, as if heaven were slamming the brakes on a speeding train. What if time in the sky is just a reflection of the fall? This is a challenge few dare face, because it means that time would not be part of the original plan, but rather a patch, a response, a containment of the disorder that arose when something or someone moved away from the eternal source. Perhaps this is why the fallen angels lost track of time. Perhaps this is why the beings on the throne do not move in a straight line. Perhaps this is why God is never described as someone who waits, but as someone who is. If time was born of the fall, then every second lived is a silent reminder that we are still away from home, and that despite everything we built within this time, the soul feels that something is returning, that we are ever closer to a point where time will no longer be necessary, where everything will return to how it was before the Word. Perhaps that's why so many people feel like they no longer fit into their routine, that the clock is ticking, that the days blur together, that the world is speeding up, but there's an inner call to stop, breathe, observe, as if somewhere within their consciousness, eternity were whispering, "Remember me?" What if this whisper is not longing, but a summons? The idea that time is dying is not a sentence of finality. It is a revelation of return, a clue left by God between the lines of history, in the fragments of lost books, in ignored symbols, in sensations we cannot explain. And each person who awakens to this possibility becomes a point of light in this invisible clock, a silent marker that the cycle is closing. The question is not just whether time exists in the sky. The question is, why did he exist here, and what we are being called to do now that it begins to disappear? Comment here. That makes sense to me. I want to know who else felt that perhaps time was just a bridge to bring us back to eternity. If you made it this far, it's because this message spoke to something deep within you. And perhaps this is already a sign that this journey, the journey toward revelations that most people prefer to avoid, is yours too. So if this kind of content touches you, if it helps you see the invisible more clearly, if it provides answers to questions that haven't always been well received, subscribe to the channel, not out of obligation, but because you're ensuring the space of searching remains alive, and that the next revelation finds you. Leave a like if anything in this video resonated with you. It helps more than it seems, and strengthens a connection we created here. And comment below, "I'm with you until the end." This way I will know who really walked with me through each layer of this mystery. There's a video here that goes into more detail on this topic. Click through and follow along with me there, because the next key is already waiting for you.